Hello, welcome to the Society for Evangelical Armenians YouTube channel. I'm Dan Chapa, your host, and today I'm joined by a very special guest, Dr. Alan Rhoda, and we are here to discuss open theism. I apologize, I have an echo, so I fixed that. Okay. I did have a little bit of an error, but I've been able to fix that. So the genesis of this conversation is really an opportunity to look at Dr. Rhoda's book. Dr. Rhoda has written a recent book, I think it was in 2024, and it's actually titled Open Theism. And I had a chance to read that and just had some questions and some thoughts. Obviously, being from a classical Armenian side, I hold that God knows the future, but I'm interested in understanding open theism before I say I disagree with it. I'd like to first know what it is. So with all that said as a preliminary, Dr. Rhoda, welcome to the program.
Welcome, Dan. Thanks for the invitation to have this discussion with you. And I must apologize for the lighting I have here. I know I look like totally orange right now. It's not my natural appearance. It's just because my wife is resting in one room, and I just had to locate to a spare room, and it just happens to have very poor lighting and a very boring background. But anyway, to our topic. Let me see. I think you asked me to introduce myself a little bit.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm a Christian philosopher. I've got my PhD in 2004 from Fordham University. Spent about 10 years kind of teaching at different universities, mostly the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and at Notre Dame, where I was a postdoc there at the Center for Philosophy of Religion. And I've got about 15 or so publications to my credit. But I'm currently working as an academic librarian at a Christian seminary. But it gives me a little bit of time to do philosophy on the side, so I keep my my skills sharp in that area. And I have a blog where like every couple of weeks I put something up, and usually philosophy of religion related. I am an open theist, and I understand this is the main topic of tonight. Dan identifies as a Molinist. I used to be a Molinist way back in my undergraduate and early grad school days. To relate a quick story, when I was an undergraduate, I wrote a paper for one of my philosophy classes on Molinism, and I used the standard sources, from Flint and Craig and Fredoso and Molina, and I liked the system a lot. But I read a paper by William Hasker that asked a simple question that I thought, well, that's a very fair question. I don't know how to answer that. And the question was simply, how does God come by his middle knowledge? And so I said, good question. So I whipped out my copy of Craig and Flint and Fredoso and stuff and started looking for answers. And I was singularly unimpressed with what I found. Craig's answer is basically, well, God just does, which isn't really an answer. So then I went off to grad school. I was still a Molinist. But then I started getting some pushback from some of the Thomists there. One guy in particular, I had a long discussion with him, and he was like, "What? No, that middle knowledge is just impossible, because this information's got to come from somewhere, and it has to come from God. It can't be independent of God. I mean, because God is being, and everything is sourced in being." And so he was pushing me from that direction, and stuff. And I eventually, after thinking things through a bit, I concluded that Molinism wasn't going to work. I explored all the other options around there, and finally found myself kind of process of elimination, leaning into open theism, which I didn't even know about at first. I kind of arrived at it, and then I found out about it. But anyway, since then, I've written a number of papers on the topic, and a recent book, and would be regarded probably as an expert on open theism.
Well, definitely welcome to the program. So, as much as I'd love to start defending Molinism or something like that, I'm going to resist that temptation, because I think I'd love to hear your thoughts primarily on open theism and your work there. So that's probably better than me trying to defend myself or something. But I will say this for those on the channel. So obviously the Society for Evangelical Armenians has Molinists and it has non-Molinists in it. We do affirm God's foreknowledge, but Molinism certainly isn't a requirement. A lot of the other position that's quite common for Armenians is simple foreknowledge. But with that said, I guess, would you like to launch into basically a review of your work on open theism?
Yeah. I think we can just start with the first slide and dive right in.
Okay.
I can read it if you'd like, or if you want to.
Please.
Whatever. Yeah. So when I speak of open theism, I think it's important to define the view in a fair and accurate way. And so here's my take on open theism. It says it's the view that the future is partly open-ended from God's omniscient perspective, because and to the extent that there are unresolved future contingencies. There are such contingencies because a sovereign God wants it that way. And God wants it that way because he wants interactive relationality with free creatures. So instead of micromanaging all of creation history, God has chosen to delegate some of the details to his creatures. Okay. Does that make sense so far?
It does. Yep.
The wording I've chosen there is quite deliberate. So, I want to emphasize that it's just we only claim the future is partly open-ended. We think there are many respects in which the future has been settled by God. Since God is sovereign, he gets to choose exactly how open-ended creation is. And I also want to stress that on open theism, especially on the view that I would defend, God is properly omniscient, without qualification. Okay, God knows all of reality exactly as it is. Okay. So then I have this technical term here: unresolved future contingencies. Let me just, the second little blurb there kind of tries to clarify that a bit. By this, I mean it's a specific respect in which the future is causally open, meaning that the course of history from now on, it can really go in more than one direction, right? The classic example of this goes back to Aristotle when he was talking about whether there will be a sea battle in the next day, and he considers this to be a future contingency. So there might be a sea battle and there might not be a sea battle. And it's an open question. Is there going to be one or not? That's what I mean by a future contingency. There's something where where reality comes to a fork in the road, basically. And if you have a free creature poised between two open options, then that creature can take either of those options. And so there's a future contingency at that point. Once one of those options is chosen, then that contingency is resolved, right? It's no longer a future contingency. It's now, we move from a state where, like you're at the fork in the road to having chosen one of the forks. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm definitely tracking all of that. I guess what I would ask at this point is, I think I know the answer because I've read your book, but the language on this slide is talking mostly about causally open, which in that sense, Arminians also would say the future is causally open, because we would reject determinism.
Yeah.
But I think if I understood your book correctly, you make an argument such that, well, if the future is causally open, therefore it's epistemically open as well.
Yeah, we will get there in due course. What the gist of the argument that is at the core of my book is, I want to say, if the future is causally open in some respects, then it is also just open across the board. So it's going to be aleathically open. That is, there is no complete true story of the future. And if there is no, settled truth about the future, that, like a unique, a unique continuation, right? A unique actual future. Then there is, since knowledge entails truth, if you don't have a unique linear true story of the future, then you can't have then even a being who was omniscient would not know the future as a unique linear story, because there just isn't any such truth to be known, right? And I would also argue the future is ontically open, which is to say that the block universe idea of the B theorists, as they call themselves, or is false. That the future events do not exist; they're not part of the ontology. And also a providentially open. That is, if God has not selected, has not in his creative decree willed a unique course of future history, right?
Right. So based on that analysis, I would just say the contrast would be, I agree with you that the future is causally open and ontologically open. I'm okay with the A theory of time. But I would disagree that it is aleathically open, meaning I think there are true propositions that cover every event that's going to happen from now until Christ returns. And then I also think it's epistemically settled, as in not that you and I know it, but God knows.
Yeah, somebody does.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Okay.
And as a Molinist, I think you would also want to say that it is reject the idea that it's providentially open.
As a Molinist, right? I would say that this is the best possible world.
Yeah, for Arminians who affirm just something in the neighborhood of simple foreknowledge, they would want to deny that the future is providentially settled and say that it is providentially open, because on that view, God does not select a possible world that is defined with a complete history, past, present, and future. Right. That's one of the distinguishing characteristics of Molinism over against the simple foreknowledge view.
I think so. To be honest, I don't want to get into the weeds too much, but I know the president of SEA, Dr. F. Bassiano, has argued that based on God's being outside of time, he can still use his foreknowledge providentially. But whether he uses it entirely for basically decides everything or not, I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah. Even if we grant that one could somehow on those models use the knowledge providentially, it still wouldn't be a denial of providential openness, because that requires that all the details of creation have been kind of like pre-selected at the outset by God, so that God's creative decree specifies the whole course of creation history.
Okay, right. So rather than like a one-off exception to, I don't know, to arrange the crucifixion or whatever, if God were to decide every event, then it would be providentially closed, not open.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. I'm tracking. Okay, cool.
So the reason why I have these distinctions between these different types of settledness or openness is precisely so that I have a clear way to compare and contrast like open theism and Molinism and the simple foreknowledge and timeless knowledge and theistic determinism and these different models, because they each want to say, or could say that the future is open in this respect, but not in this respect. And so if you're gonna compare and contrast these models without ambiguity, you need to distinguish, whether we're talking aleithically or epistemically or providentially or ontically and so forth.
Right. Got it. Cool.
All right.
Ready for the next chart?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Okay.
All right. So I guess this was your slide. So why don't you tell me what you're...
Sure. Okay. So this is from the section 2.2 in your book, and it kind of breaks down open theism into kind of different buckets. So open theism contrasts between open future open theism, OFOT, with limited foreknowledge open theism, LFOT. And then you have a preference for open future open theism versus limited foreknowledge open theism. I think, if I remember correctly, your primary reasons were the limited foreknowledge open theist might be someone that says, well, God can just choose not to want to know certain things, including the present, including the past, or something like that.
That's one version of it, yeah.
And you set that version aside, and you said, no, I prefer this open future open theism. And so then future open theism is God knows all truths, but there is no unique actual future because the future itself is open. So it's not like there's a fact and God doesn't know it. It's just there's no facts about, there's no truths about certain future contingencies.
Yeah.
And then go ahead, please.
Yeah, if I could interject there. So the main contrast between the open futurist version of open theism and the limited foreknowledge version is that the latter wants to say that there are truths that God does not know. And one of the main liabilities of that way of going is you immediately have to confront, well, then how can you say God is omniscient? On one version of the limited sort of foreknowledge view, they'll say, well, there are certain truths about future contingents that they're true, but they're just not knowable. So we can't, it doesn't count against God's omniscience because God knows all that can be known. On another version, they'll say, well, no, the reason why God doesn't know these truths is because he doesn't want to know them. So he chooses not to know them. But I think either way you go there, it runs into major, major problems. And you're also have a real uphill argument from the get-go, because you've got to try to argue, well, how can God be ignorant, whether by choice or not, of a vast array of truths, and still be omniscient in some sense, or be the greatest the possible being. You just run right into a whole bunch of objections. And in my view, whatever reasons one might give for thinking there are truths that God does not know are equally good reasons for thinking that there aren't any such truths in the first place. So I think if you're going to be an open theist, you ought to be an open future open theist.
I'm tracking. Okay. Yes. Yeah. In fact, to this and actually the next point on bivalence, I think what jumped out to me as a stronger version of open theism than the opposite, the LFOT.
Sorry.
No worries. I got my dog. I got a Boston Terrier running around here somewhere. It just came across as more. So I would think the limited foreknowledge open theists have a significant disadvantage. They can't reject the standard definition for omniscience and God knows all truths and rejects all falsehoods, because there's truths that God doesn't know, and they can come down with a minimized definition of omniscience, but they can't accept the kind of the classic one. So,
they have to cook the definition of omniscience in order to keep using that term.
Yeah, for sure. So now this next part really caught my attention, though. Maybe it's better for you to explain it than for me to explain it. But this part about bivalence, this one was really interesting to me.
Yeah. Okay. So on the open futurist side of open theism, there's a split between those who want to kind of say the best way to make sense of the idea that there just is no settled truth of the matter as to how the future is going to go. There are a group that wants to say, well, the best way to make sense of this is to deny the principle of bivalence. And there's another group that says, no, we don't need to deny that. We can make sense of the alethic openness of the future without denying that. So what is the principle of bivalence? It's simply the claim that every proposition has exactly one of two truth values, and those values are true and false, and that's it. So if you hold to the principle, then and somebody just says, okay, here's an arbitrary proposition, then you have to say, well, the proposition has a truth value. that value might be true or it might be false, but it's got to be one of those, and exactly one of those. Those who deny the principle of bivalence will say, well, no, actually, there can be propositions that are neither true nor false. They are somehow indeterminate, right, in their truth value. Maybe they simply don't have a truth value at all, or maybe the value that they have is something other than true or false.
Okay. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does, but okay. So just using a practical example. So numbers are either even or odd. And I think that's an example of bivalence. And I can set up an Excel sheet that will analyze a number and say, well, if it's not odd, then it's even.
Yeah.
And just calculate it across that whole column of numbers all at one time. And I can sort on it, filter on it, and stuff like that. So to me, it's really, I think, just like the omniscience, maybe these non-bivalentists can redefine bivalence and use it sometimes. Otherwise, like, how does my Excel sheet work? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay. So the main way to argue for a denial of bivalence that I'm aware of is in cases of vagueness. Okay.
Okay.
If you think that some cases of vagueness are objective, which is to say, it's not simply a matter of our language, failing to be precise, or our state of knowledge, we're just not clear on things, but maybe, so imagine, we're reading a text on quantum mechanics, for example, and it's talking about these, how electrons inhabit these clouds, the electron cloud, and that if they may say that, well, there is no precise location where the electron is. It's rather a kind of smear over a range, and there's a probability associated with every point in that area. Okay. Now, if you take that kind of description at face value, then the question, like the proposition where you like stick your finger on a particular point and said the electron is exactly here. Well, you might say, is that true? You might think there's a certain probability, or it's sort of somewhat there and somewhat not, so if we can, so there are domains in which people will argue that the world is just fundamentally vague at some level and to some degree. If you have that kind of case, then I think you've got a pretty good case that the principle of bivalence should fail in those areas. Okay. But that's not going to mean that bivalence fails across the board. It's just going to mean we have a case where we have propositions they're just, there's no, like, they neither exactly correspond to or don't correspond to, just because reality is fuzzy.
Got it.
Right.
So okay. So you're saying in some contexts the rule of bivalence will work for these folks, and in other contexts it wouldn't, like quantum indeterminacy, but also perhaps for the future.
Yeah. So the reason why I don't accept or why I want to hold on to the principle of bivalence for future contingency is I want to say, even if there are plausible reasons for denying the principle in cases of objective vagueness, future contingency is not such a case. we can easily describe scenarios with future contingents that have no sort of vagueness at all, right? It can stipulate that, actually, and you still can raise the same issues about fatalism and foreknowledge and all this stuff. So so you're kind of left, if you deny the principle of bivalence, I think it's undermotivated in the context of future contingency.
Got it. Yes, and it's, yeah, I understand, and it's nice to just use the standard logic unless there's some real good strong reason. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So now, what about the bivalent side? So, and I can bring up the next quote if you want.
Yeah. Why don't we go there?
Sure. Why don't you go ahead?
Okay. So those open futurists who want to hold on to the principle of bivalence, at least in the context of future contingency, are going to say that will and will not propositions about future contingency are logical contraries, not true contradictories, which is to say that both types of propositions can be and are false when the events they concern remain causally contingent. What's going to be true in that case is some other type of proposition. We might say it's a might and might not, or a could proposition, or a will probably proposition, but it will be a proposition that doesn't present that future state as definitively the case, right? So if we're thinking about the sea battle and whether it's going to happen tomorrow or not, the open futurist here would say that, well, if it is a future contingent, right now, whether there is a sea battle tomorrow, then that's an open question. And so it's not yet a settled truth that there will be a sea battle, nor is it a settled truth that there will not be a sea battle. What is true is that there might and might not be a sea battle. It's up in the air. And so both the will and the will not propositions are false because they do not exhaust the possibilities, right? One says the future is determinate in this way. The other says the future is determinate in a different way. And the third possibility is just to say, well, no, the future is currently indeterminate in that respect.
So, you know, going back to the why example, so you come to the fork in the road, it's causally indeterminate, and no one can posit that, oh, well, it's going to go, it's going to get, okay, well, let me use an example like Dan is going to watch the Cowboys home opener. No one can posit that because it's not causally determinate.
Yeah.
No one can make a true statement about it.
Well, a person could, I mean, yeah. So, right, I would say if we posit that is now a future contingency,
right,
then it's whether you do that at some future time is still up in the air, because you might choose to do it and you might not. And which you do is still up to you. And so until you make your choice at the relevant moment, until your choice is precluded by forces beyond your control, like say your TV blows up, like a few minutes before you're, trying to watch it, right? Then then it's still an open question. So neither the will nor the will not are going to be true. Both would be false. And another proposition that expresses that contingency, like the might and might not, is going to be true in its place. So you always have a true proposition about the future, right? You never have this case where there's nothing to be known about the future. There's always a truth about the future. But which truth that is changes depending on the status of reality, right? As future contingencies are resolved, or just as time passes, what is true changes.
So the truth about what's going to happen can change from true to false. So like today it could be true, Dan will watch the Cowboys home opener in September, and then 3 weeks from now it's no longer true because the Cowboy Stadium collapses or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
That would prevent that from being a possibility, right? I mean, if a terrorist, say, should go and blow up the stadium the day before, well, okay, now that's removed you're watching the game from the realm of causal possibility. Unless somebody finds a very quick way to rebuild the stadium or relocate the game or something like that, right? So,
So let me ask it in terms of the correspondence theory of truth. So from my perspective, which I think you would call an Occamist perspective, which is fine. I like a lot of what Occam had to say. But so just a simple correspondence theory of truth is, so there's a proposition today, Dan will watch the home opener, and the basis of truth is the event in September. And when those two align, then the statement is true. And when they don't align, then the statement is false. And you say, will and will not are not contradictory. And under my theory, I'd be very concerned that they are, because I would say, well, if it's true that I both will and will not watch the game, then in reality, when the world hits, in September, I'm both watching and not watching it, and there's two Dans and I'm split in half, and that does seem like a contradiction at that point.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So if you're taking Occamist perspective on the truth conditions of tensed language, then you would want to say that the way we assess a proposition about another time, like a claim about the future, is we jump ahead to the time in question and kind of how things are then automatically is going to determine or settle how the truth is now concerning that, right?
Right.
So I've got a variety of objections against Ockhamism. I don't want to get deep in the weeds there because that will side rail a thing. So I'll just make one observation. Okay.
Sure.
I think that Occamism gives the wrong truth conditions for propositions about the future or the past, because I think Occamism does not take tense seriously enough. What you get with the Occamist truth conditions is basically I'm hearing some feedback in my microphone, but tense language is tensed because it's oriented around a privileged moment in time that we call the present, right? So when I speak about the present, I'm saying, how things are now. When I speak about the past, I'm talking about the past, but I'm not merely talking about the past. Because this is a past tense, I'm also speaking about how things are now. I'm saying, like, it is now the case that it is now the case that Napoleon, lost the Battle of Waterloo. So I'm not merely speaking about the past, I'm also speaking about the present. And I think the same is true of the future. When I say that something will happen in the future, I'm not merely saying something about how things are at some future date. I'm saying that it is now the case that that future thing will happen. So you're like, you're starting at the reference point for tense, which is the present, and you're moving forward from the present toward the future. And as with the past, you start at the present and you move backward. So the true truth conditions for a will statement about some future state should entail that it is now determinately the case that this thing happens. So you need there to be like future sort of relevant facts that obtain now in order to ground truths about the future. You can't simply base their truth in like when the future arrives, this stuff is this way.
Okay.
I could say more, but I'm not sure I want to get too off into that.
I hear you. Well, this is important, right? Because it seems to be, if I understand, not to jump ahead for the listeners, but this seems to be aligned with your proposition 11 in your CEO argument. But okay, well, why don't we keep moving forward? It'll probably come back. I bet this will come up again.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So okay, fatalism. You want to talk about fatalism?
Yeah. So the plan for this for our dialogue was to look into this argument that I call the open future argument, and it's essentially is my core argument for open future, open theism. The claim of that argument is that if there are future contingents, then open futurism is true. Where open futurism is simply the denial that there is any such thing as a unique actual future, right? The future is objectively open-ended. So the way I try to argue for that is by looking at fatalism. I show how to construct just a simple, valid argument for fatalism. It's very easy to do. So when I speak of fatalism, what I mean is simply the denial of future contingency, which entails that there is only one causally possible future. Right? Being only one causally possible future, that's also equivalent to determinism, causal determinism. Right? So fatalism entails causal determinism. Right? Anyway, to construct a valid argument for fatalism, I think you only need. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm listening.
To construct a valid argument for fatalism, you only need two assumptions. The first is that there are fixed facts, and I'll try to clarify that a bit in a second, and that there are enough of these fixed facts to constitute a what I'll call a future specifier. So let me try to define those terms here. All right, we all believe that there are some facts, some features of reality that are fixed or now unpreventable, right? Such that we do not, and perhaps never did, have any say about them. It was never up to us whether these things were facts or not, right? Like the laws of logic, right? Mathematical truths, basic moral laws, and here we could add lots of other things. The existence of God, right? It's never been up to us, right? It's not even up to God, right? If God is a necessary being, the divine nature, certainly not up to us. The laws of nature, well, they're up to God at some point, but they're not up to us, right? We don't have any say about whether like gravity works, or electromagnetism or anything like that, right? So we all think that there are certain features of reality that are just fixed, right? It's not up to you, not up to me, not up to any creature. They define the constraints within which we live and move and have our being, right? Whatever choices we're able to make are going to have to comport with those fixed facts because they're just not up to us, right? Now, I want to say if those fixed facts, whatever they are, okay, I don't need to specify exactly which fixed facts I'm talking about here. I'm just, all I want to say is that whatever we think these fixed facts are, if they collectively constitute a future specifier, then we get fatalism. So by a future specifier, I just mean that they single out a unique continuation of the past and present, a unique sort of possible future as the actual one, right? This is the way things are going to go, right? From here on out, there's a single path, right? From now to, well, however far the future goes, right? And that is what will happen, right? It's determinate. So if you have these fixed facts and they constitute and therefore entail a future specifier, then they pick out a unique actual future. Okay?
So let me ask about that. Let's say on a piece of paper, I write two statements. One, Dan will watch the Cowboy game, the Cowboy opener in September, and the other says Dan will not watch the Cowboy openers in September. Are they both future specifiers, or is one of them a future specifier?
Neither of them would be a future specifier because they don't have enough scope to specify the entire future. Things that would work as future specifiers would be things like, if you're a Molinist, you think God's creative decree is a future specifier.
Okay, so if I wrote two predictions of every event, but they just diverge, let's say they're identical in every single way, but they cover all of time. But the only difference is one says Dan will watch the Cowboys, and the other one says that Daniel won't watch the Cowboys.
So you have these big conjunctive propositions, I guess, but they differ in just one point.
Yeah, just reams of paper, but I write the whole future, right? Okay.
Okay.
So are those future specifiers?
Only if they, well, I want to say it. Yes, I think you could say that they are. But each one specifies a different future. Right. One says this is the way the future is going to go. The other says this is the way the future is going to go. And I would say, as an open futurist, that neither of those is is a true future specifier. Right? Each is specifying a future, but not the future. But God's creative decree, if you think it's meticulous, that is a future specifier. Or if you think God has exhaustively definite foreknowledge, well, that is a future specifier. Or if you accept determinism, then you think that the causal matrix of reality fixes how everything is going to go through the whole future. So the causal framework is a future specifier. If you're an eternalist about the ontology of time, then you think that time is this block construct, that all future events eternally exist. Well, then that block is a future specifier. If you think that there is a complete true story of the future, then that's going to be a future specifier. So all of these are ways in which you might suppose that there is a set of facts that specifies a specific future. It says this is exactly how the future is going to go from here on out. Now, that alone is not going to get you fatalism, but you have to add the other assumption, which is that these facts, these future specifying facts, are fixed. They are now unpreventable. And I think when you combine both assumptions, then you can then you get a very short and demonstrably valid argument for fatalism.
So I guess the reason why I asked the question about the two books, I think I heard you saying, if there's a book or a story about all the future and it is true, then that's a future specifier. My question is, well, what if it's not? Is it still a future specifier?
Okay. Yeah. If we suppose, well, it wouldn't be a specifier of the actual future if we suppose it's true. It would be like you could still say it's a specifier of a different future, a one that is non-actual.
Okay.
Right. But as long as it's a complete story of the entire future timeline, then it's specifying a future, but it's got to be true, right? A true story in order to specify the future.
Okay, got it. Because even on open theists, most open theists would say God knows all future possibilities, right? So
yeah,
God could write 1,000 or millions of stories, because they would all be, this is possible and this one's possible and this one's possible, and one of them happens to be right. But in your view, that doesn't. Go ahead.
Sorry. On my view, none of those stories is right. What is because there are unresolved future contingencies, it's as if the story of creation is still being written, right? As those contingencies are resolved, then those sort of details are added to the story. But there is no complete description of all of history there's no unique sort of linear account of all of history. On the open futurist perspective, it doesn't exist.
Okay, so let's fast forward to Christ returns.
Mm-hmm.
And you look backwards across time, everything that's happened. God knew all of those things could happen, and he knew those from the get-go, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but that knowledge didn't count as a future specifier because at the time, God knew it from day one. He knew it as possible, but he didn't know it as true. It wasn't true, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Well, yeah. So if you imagine, okay, so okay, I'm gonna say this. If a future specifier is true, then I want to say that it picks out a unique actual future, and the word unique is important there, right? I want to say it's like a singular line, right, from here on out. So if we imagine that there are future contingencies, like we have the fork in the road and then another fork and another fork, right, we get this structure of a branching tree. Right? We have all these different nodes along the way where reality forks. It could go this way and it could go that way. And so from the starting point, all you have is this this tree that's branching out, right? There's no single path through that tree that is the actual future, or the future that is going to become actual. And so you don't have a future specifier because you don't have anything that picks out a single, a unique path through that branching array.
Right.
The future.
Okay. Whereas on my view, I do have a future specifier because from a causal standpoint, there's a branching tree, but from an alethic standpoint, one of those branches glows.
Yes, exactly.
It's a glowing path, so it's a privileged, unique path through. But that glowing, I would say, is true. But you're saying there is no truth about future contingencies, so none of those paths glow. God, it's not that God doesn't know it, but He doesn't know it as this is the path that's going to take place rather than that path or that.
Right. Right. Okay. He knows the future as open-ended because, on my view, the future is open-ended. Right. Okay. That's the open futurist position. So let me just wrap up this slide here.
Sure, please.
Because I think we want to get to the two possible responses to fatalism next. So I want to say, if you have a set of fixed facts that are sufficient collectively to constitute a future specifier, then you get fatalism. The specifier is going to pick out a unique actual future, and the fixity of those facts means that future is unavoidable, right? Because in order to avoid it, you would have to do something that is not compatible with with some of those fixed facts, right? Which, by definition of fixity, you can't do, right? So simply put, if the unique actual future is not avoidable, then we have fatalism, because you're saying there's exactly one way things are going to go and there's nothing anybody can do about it, right? It's the only causally possible future, and hence there are no future contingents. But if this UAF, if this unique actual future is avoidable, and we have these fixed facts that collectively specify a future, then we get a contradiction, because then we're saying that we have these future specifying facts that are fixed, and these facts are either not future specifying or not fixed, right? You can't have it both ways. So either you have fatalism or you get a contradiction, which means you've got to deny one of those two assumptions if you are to avoid fatalism.
Good. I'm tracking. Here, I'll pull up the next one.
Okay. So let me, since we had two assumptions that were sufficient to lead to fatalism, if you're going to be an anti-fatalist, then you have to reject one of those two assumptions. And so depending on which assumption you reject, it's either going to push you toward open futurism or what I call preventable futurism. Okay. So the open futurist, and that's the camp I'm in, is going to say, well, yeah, there are fixed facts, but there are no future specifiers, and so there is no unique actual future. They're just, I guess as you say, they're how it resists type fatalism, right? Denies that there is a settled future story waiting to unfold. The future remains genuinely open until all contingencies are resolved. So it's like you've got the story of the future is still being written. It's not completed, right? So there is no unique actual future. The other view, the preventable preventable futurism, wants to say, well, no, there is a unique actual future, and hence there is at least one future specifier. Whether that's God's knowledge, God's will, the set of truths, the ontology of time, or the causal matrix in which we inhabit, or what have you, or a bunch of those. There is a unique actual future, but I call this preventable futurism because this view wants to say, but the facts that are picking out the unique actual future are not wholly fixed. That there are enough facts to specify a future, but there aren't enough fixed facts to specify a future. Right? Does that make sense? Yes. So the facts that are doing the specifying are, at least to some extent, still preventable, right? We still have say about those facts. We can negate them, reverse them, change them, can do something to, rather than the facts constraining us, we have some kind of power over those facts.
Right, and that is, so Occam would definitely fit in the preventable.
Exactly, yes. He's the classic example of a preventable futurist.
Okay, and so I am an Occamist, but I'm also a Molinist, and you would say, well, maybe you don't even qualify as a preventable futurist, but we could argue that point. But for the moment, if you could treat me as an Occamist, that would be very helpful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Fair enough. All right. So on to the next chart.
Yeah.
Okay. So this one is the argument against future specifiers. So.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So my strategy, after I lay out, here's how you build an argument for fatalism. It only needs these two assumptions. It's demonstrably valid, and so you need to resist the conclusion. You need to reject one of the two premises. That gives you these two options: open futurism or preventable futurism. And then, since I want to argue for open futurism, my strategy is to argue against preventable futurism, right? I want to say that there aren't any future specifiers. There just isn't enough information out there to specify a unique actual future. Okay, yeah, and so the gist of the argument is I'm going to derive a contradiction from preventable futurism, And it centers around the idea of information. Okay. If you say preventable futurism is true, then you're saying that there exists and always has existed, or at least as long as the future specifier has been around, sufficient information to pick out a unique actual future. Okay. But if you say there, as preventable futurists want to, that there are future contingents, then you run into a problem, because it turns out that some of that information doesn't exist yet. So you wind up in a contradiction, because you have to say the information both exists and does not exist. And that's the kind of the core of the argument. It gets into what I call this relation of ontological dependence. I don't know if we want to jump to the quote, or if I say more about this. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I say that future specifiers are ontologically dependent on the actual occurrences of future contingency resolving events, because ontological dependence is a type of explanatory dependence whereby the existence of something is explained. And at this point, could you bring up that diagram from my book with the yeah. So this is a diagram I include in my book. I imagine that I've got this scenario. Okay, it's a silly scenario, but you know, the point is that it be clear. So I imagine that I have libertarian free will with respect to a forced choice between vanilla ice cream and chocolate ice cream. Okay. So I'm imagining that I'm in this scenario where I'm equally free to choose one flavor or the other. I can't just sit there at the crossroads and postpone my choice. I've got to make a choice, and it's got to be one of those two and not both. Okay, just to make the example crisp, right? And so what you get with preventable futurism is, say, if we imagine that there's a future specifier that says Alan chooses a vanilla, okay, let's call that a vanilla specifier, okay, because that's part of the future that it specifies. Well, that specifier is going to entail that I make that choice, right? Because that information is included in the specifier. But if I am free right here and now to choose vanilla or not to choose vanilla, then it's up to me right here, right now, whether that vanilla future specified by that vanilla specifier ever comes to be, right? And so the information that Alan chooses vanilla is something that I create at the moment of choice. The information does not and cannot pre-exist my choice. It comes into being as a result of my choice, and therefore it explains the existence of the vanilla specifier. So on the typical alchemist view, right? Let's say, we have these free choices. We can choose to do this or choose to do something else, but it's in virtue of our making the choices we do that God has always foreknown that we were going to make that choice and not the other choice, right? So you make the specifier, in this case, God's foreknowledge, becomes explanatorily dependent upon the actual occurrences of the future choices. Is that making sense?
Yeah. I could try to explain what I think Occam is saying about this. So he would say, okay, so in the past, you can have the proposition, Dr. Rhoda will eat vanilla. And in the future, you have Dr. Rhoda actually eating vanilla, and the truth corresponds to that event. But Occam is famous for nominalism and Occam's razor, of course. So his primary concern is ontological inflation or bloat. And what he's saying is that there is no existence or separate ontology to truth. So what exists is the proposition back here, Dr. Rhoda will eat vanilla. And what will exist is Dr. Rhoda actually eating vanilla. But there's no asterisk on top of the proposition, Dr. Rhoda will eat vanilla, as a separate being with a separate ontology of truth. The truth doesn't have a separate ontology. It's simply the correspondence or relation between the proposition and the event. So he would, I think, would deny that the future specifier has a separate ontology. And that's why I was asking, well, does it matter whether of the two book scenario, does it matter which one is true? And it did matter which one was true. But he's saying that truth isn't a separate being sitting there in the past. It doesn't have its own being.
I'm not entirely sure I follow that, but it sounds to me like he's going to run into a grounding problem. And several philosophers have pressed this against Ockhamism, including myself.
Okay.
If the future event does not exist, it's not part of the ontology. Like suppose we have a presentist ontology of time, right? Future events simply don't exist. And so if you're saying that the past truth of the proposition that these things will happen is already there, but that past truth it owes its truth, status as true to something that does not and never has existed, then we have a failure of grounding here, right? We have truths without a truth maker.
Okay. So he agrees. So you could only ground it in the future being, in that future event, the future existence. That is correct.
Which is no grounding at all, really, because the future doesn't exist, right?
Okay. So
non-existent things can't ground anything.
Right. And so this is exactly why the grounding issue is so important. Because it seems that, and I would say that the case is reversed, that the only thing that could ground a future tense proposition is a future existence. So I would deny that it's possible that all future tense propositions about future contingencies are false. And I would say that they are contradictory.
Well,
so in other words, in your argument, I'd have to reject proposition 11. And
what is that proposition?
Good question. Let's see. The actual occurrence of a future contingency resolving the event changes an indeterminate open-ended question information state into a determinate specified outcome information state, which is the same as you're saying, well, propositions about the future contingencies are all false. Because go ahead, I'm listening.
Well, so if we look at claim 11, right? That's illustrated by that diagram that we were just looking at. So the idea is there that if or to use the example of the fork in the road, because I can illustrate that here. If I am free with respect to which way I go at this juncture, then it is up to me here and now to to choose which becomes actual. So prior to the choice, the information state of reality is basically it is an open question. Like, will Alan go left? Will Alan go right? We're waiting on an answer, right? Once I make a choice, now we have an answer. And so one of these options becomes actualized and the other is no longer possible. It's the path not chosen, right? So we move from a state where it's either A or B, and or either A or not A, and neither is actually the case. But that's the open question state, to a state where one is the case and the other is no longer possible. It's not even it's because the contingency has been resolved. It's excluded. So that, I think, is the necessary structure of future contingency. If the information comes into being as a result of the resolution of the contingency.
So, like I said, my concern with denying the grounding based on the future event is you end up with not contradictions, but contradictions with respect to propositions about the future events.
Well, I mean, we've already addressed this in part, but I think that's just based on a bad semantics. I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Patrick Todd. He's a American philosopher, but now who works in Scotland. But he wrote a book a few years back called The Open Future. And he gives what is to date the most sort of extended defense of open futurism. Okay. And he proposes one of his nice moves that he makes in the book is he proposes a generic semantics for will and will not that is neutral between Ockhamism and, say, like the Peircean or the non-Occamist semantics. And essentially the way he puts it, he says, to say that something will happen is to say that let me see, in all of the available futures, it does happen. And then by an available future, he means futures that are compatible with all of the future relevant facts. So an Occamist is going to be able to use that and say, oh, okay, yeah, the future relevant facts include all these facts that specify the unique actual future. So that's part of it. And so so it's true that it will happen because these facts exist. And whereas the non-Occamist is going to say, okay, well, the will claim is false because the future relevant facts simply don't exist. So you get a semantics that both sides can use and make their case. So it doesn't prejudice the Occamist or the non-Occamist with respect to the semantics. What the advantage of that, though, is he's able to distinguish the semantics from the metaphysics, right? So you have the semantic question, and then you have the metaphysical question. And by adopting a neutral semantics, he can say that it really turns upon the metaphysical question of what future relevant facts are there. right? And that's going to determine whether the alchemist gets the result he wants or the non-alchemist gets the result that he wants. Does that make sense?
It does. So on the Peircean semantics, it would be unless the future is determined. I mean, it's really kind of, yeah. So I think so. With the correspondence theory of truth, there's the future tense proposition and the future event, and they correspond, so therefore it's true. If there is no future event, in this sense, it's not available even when it happens, or the only thing that could ground the truth of a future tense proposition is the future event itself. Otherwise,
no, I deny that.
So I would say that if you deny it, you even if you, let's take a completely determined event, then that is not talking about the future event. It's talking about the present state of the world. And
every future tense proposition is talking about the present state of the world. That's what it is to be a future tense statement.
So
all tense language is grounded in the present.
Why should I think that?
Well, that's the difference between tensed and tenseless language.
Okay.
A tensed picks the present as the point of orientation, and then considers things from that point, right? When I say this happened, or this, I am speaking from the perspective of the present, or or if you read about this in a book, say, that written in the past, well, when the writer penned that, then the reference point is the present at when they penned it, right? They say this happened in the past, they mean prior to this reference point, right? So the reference point is built into the claim, right?
So
if you take a tense-less perspective on reality, then you remove any explicit or implied reference to a now. It's just like, it's as if you were looking at a complete space-time block from a timeless God's perspective and say, well, it's just, at t, this happens, not happened, because that situates you from a temporal perspective, right? Looking backward from a present, right? You just say X happens at time t, and this other thing happens at time t2, and this other thing happens at time t3. That's tenseless discourse, right? Tense.
Well, I don't even think you need to go to tenseless discourse. I mean, you can, but why? Let's take the past. So, we started an hour and a half ago. That statement seems to be true because let's say that, if we had a time machine and could rewind the clock or whatever, that's what happened an hour and 23 minutes ago. And that the statement corresponds to that past event. And that's why it's true.
Yeah, there is a correspondence there, but the past event, unless you hold to something like an eternalist model of time or a growing block view, you don't have a truth maker, right? You don't have a ground for that in the past event itself, because like on a presentist ontology, the past events no longer exist. So, right?
Yeah, okay.
So I would argue, though it might take us again too far out of the field here, is I would say I'm a truth maker maximalist. Okay. I think all truths have truth makers, and I think this is a corollary of the correspondence theory of truth. because
for you, every truth maker is in the present.
yeah, because I'm a presentist. So that's the only place that there could be truth makers.
Okay.
Just real briefly, the correspondence is a relation between a truth bearer, something that is true, and a truth maker. If you don't have the truth maker, you don't have the correspondence, because correspondence is a two-term relation.
Okay.
It's the truth maker that gives the ground or the explanation for why this truth bearer is true, as opposed to not being true or some other thing being true in its place. Right. So without the truth makers, you have truths that are floating free of any ontology.
So I guess, like I said, well, maybe we should move on. I just think that if I'm talking about the past, then the existent at that time in the past is what should ground the truth, not the present. But
well, it can't ground the truth if the past no longer exists. So if you're going to be, say, a presentist, for example, then you think that truths about the past need grounding, then you need to find a ground in the present.
But that means we can't talk about the past or the future. We can only talk about the present. Yes.
Well, no, because the present is well, I'll put it this way: the present contains the past and the future.
Yeah.
The present contains the past in the form, the one way or another, in the form of memories, and it contains the future in the by way of its propensities, causal forces, powers, intentions, anticipations. So both the past and the future are built into the present reality.
Okay. Interesting. We could go. I'd love to keep wrestling. What I'll say right now is I'll take some homework to read more of Todd. I have read. I loved his exchange with John Martin Fisher, although I think I probably agree more with John Martin Fisher than Todd, where they clashed. But and it's related to this point, but not exactly the same. They were trying to get to the bottom of what is the fatalist argument. But yeah. I'll take homework to read more of Todd. I'm always looking to learn more. Yeah. We may have to, for the sake of time, if you want to cover more topics, that's cool. If you want to start.
Yeah. Can I summarize my argument then against preventable futurism, and then if you want to jump to any of the other slides you had, I'll leave that to you. We can maybe try to wrap up at that point. But so the gist of, right?
What I'll do is, for the sake of any watchers, I will click through the slides. We don't have to. I mean, I can keep going, but I want to respect your time and your family's time. So I'll click through these. So anyone that wants to read through them can have that opportunity. And if there's anything that you would like to dig into, I'm happy to do so. But I will. But I made a commitment.
I want to. That's entirely fair. Okay. Well, let me just give a brief summary of my argument for open futurism, and then I'll press my case against Molinism. Okay.
Okay.
So the gist of it is that at the moment of choice, new information is created, because we're moving from a situation before the choice where it is an open question whether the agent is going to go this way or that way, right? It's really up in the air. It's up to the agent at that point. Once the choice is made, the information state of reality has changed. We no longer have an open question. We have a settled fact. The question has been answered, as it were. Will Alan go left or right has been decided with Alan will go right, or Alan goes right. Alan went right, if you will. Because these two information states, I say, are mutually incompatible. They cannot both obtain at the same time because they're just incompatible. And so the relation, but they can only obtain in temporal sequence. If they're incompatible, the relation between them can't merely be one of logical priority. It has to be a temporal priority, which means that the information about how future contingencies resolve, has to shift from the unresolved open question state to the resolved, like the settled fact condition. Has to the information can only come about in temporal sequence as future contingencies are resolved, which means that information cannot exist in the past. So preventable futurism says the information eternally exists, and it wants to say this information is dependent on how things actually play out, on the actual choices. And I'm saying you can't have it both ways. If it's dependent on the actual choices, then the information only comes into being as those choices are made. And so it cannot exist like temporally or logically or metaphysically prior to the occurrence of those choices. Okay, that's the gist of my argument. Okay,
Understood. Yeah. I think I've already said enough. So
yeah,
yeah.
With respect to Molinism, well, I've got lots of problems with Molinism, but the one that you've highlighted here and that I focus on in the book is, I think Molinism is just simply internally inconsistent. And this is because the Molinists actually, yes, they affirm future contingency. That's a core part of the model. But Molinism is also, it gives you everything you need to construct a valid argument for fatalism. They affirm future specifiers. There's at least 3 different future specifiers in Molinism, right? You have the collection of truths about the future. You have God's knowledge about the future and God's providential decree about the future. All of those are just logically distinct, and they're all future specifiers on Molinism. And it turns out on Molinism that all of those future specifiers are absolutely fixed. There is nothing you and I can do about any of those. Just take God's decree, right? There's nothing you or I can do now by our choices to undo or change or alter the content of God's decree. If we could, in other words, if you could combine Ockhamism and Molinism, then you would would rob Molinism of all of its providential oomph. Because if I can choose now to do something that would bring about God's having always decreed that I do this, and by changing, by choosing otherwise, I would have the ability to basically rewrite God's decree in a different way. So you can't have meticulous providence if you try to combine preventable futurism with Molinism. It just doesn't work. So thermodalism gives you everything you need to construct a valid argument for fatalism, which entails that there are no future contingents. Molinism wants to say that there are future contingents, so Molinism is internally inconsistent.
Okay, I guess I just don't see the inconsistency, but yeah, but I'll leave it at that.
Oh.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Any other questions or things that we should address? Or should we just call it a night?
Well, so on this point, the argument says Molinism also precludes preventable futurism because it requires that information about the future contingencies turn out to be available to God independently of the actual occurrence of those events.
Mm-hmm.
So the God's middle knowledge is independent of the events because that's knowledge of what would happen. So I guess that's true. Why is that bad?
Right. So the Molinism, yeah, rules out preventable futurism because the information is about the resolution of contingencies is included in God's middle knowledge, which is pre-volitional, right? And it's entirely independent of whether creatures even exist.
So in that first sentence, are you talking about God's middle knowledge or his free knowledge? His knowledge of what would happen or his knowledge of what will happen?
It doesn't matter, actually, because both are independent of the actual occurrences of future events. His free knowledge is simply a consequence of God's natural knowledge, middle knowledge, and God's creative decision. The creaturely events, actual creaturely events, don't factor into that at all.
So right? I disagree. So I think in both of William Lane Craig's books, he said he did not use that method to kind of give an epistemic answer as to why God knows the future. So God's free knowledge is based on the actual events.
No, it cannot be on Molinism. If you do that, then you have a bastard version of Molinism that tries to combine it with Ockhamism, and you get a direct inconsistency. Okay, you have no meticulous providence, and you have general providence with middle knowledge, and that's also inconsistent too.
No. So, okay. So again, God's middle knowledge is based on what would happen. His free knowledge is based on what will happen. And
would say based on.
So it's grounded. But those truths are grounded in.
No, they're not grounded. I
understand.
Middle knowledge isn't grounded in anything. It's just there.
Okay, so obviously we totally disagree on truth. Like I honestly think that. Well, I want to be very nice about this, but to me, the all false view is contradictory. You have to ground future tense statements in the future and past tense statements in the past. Otherwise, you end up with contradictions.
Okay, I think I've already explained why that doesn't follow, right? It's the difference between, okay, so I'm going to put it this way. Let will mean that this happens in all of the available futures. Will not means this happens in none of the available futures. And then you have a logical third option. Something happens in some of the available futures and not in others. Simply by having that third option, that avoids your charge of contradiction. Okay, both the will and the will not can be false in that intermediate contingency case.
So if yesterday I believed that I will be discussing this topic with you at 9:11 p.m.
Mhm.
And today proves that it was true.
No, it doesn't. That's
That
that's
makes sense.
that's a depends on a principle known that Patrick Todd calls retroclosure.
Okay.
It's the idea that if something is the case, then it previously was the case that it was going to be the case.
Yeah.
That is a principle that is it's a non sequitur, and on an open future model, it's just absolutely false.
The problem is without it, you end up with contradictions, like saying that statement was both, both that and the opposite were false.
No, because the opposite is, well, what do you mean? Right? If the
So if I had wrote down on a piece of paper yesterday, Dan will be discussing open theism at 11:12 with Dr. Rhoda, and in another piece of paper I wrote, Dan will not be, and it seems, wow, it seems, if both of those statements were false yesterday, and then today it turns out, we have the proof that one of them was true, those two statements are contradictory. Because one says yes and the other says no.
The two statements are contraries. They're not contradictory.
They definitely contradict. They definitely contradict.
They're not contradictory because they do not exhaust the logical space between them, right? Will means that the future is determinate in a certain respect. Will not means it is determinate in an opposite respect. In and then you have the indeterminate case where the future is simply not determinate in either respect.
So
that is a logical option there, and so the will and the will not cannot be contradictory to each other.
It's not logical because it denies bivalence.
No, it doesn't. Both the will and the will not are false when that third possibility is true. And so you maintain bivalence and you avoid the contradiction of the will and the will not. There is absolutely no inconsistency there.
Okay. All right. I'll leave it at that. Yeah. So I guess I get passionate about these topics, but I don't mean to say.
Yeah, I do too. I do too. And
so it's all good.
Yeah. I don't take it personally.
I will say this much, that I found your work to be the most articulate, well thought out case of open theism that I've read. It really was.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And, I'm sure you put in a massive amount of thought and work into it. So I'm very grateful for that. That's, yeah, you have a lot of respect for me, so I appreciate that. And I don't want any of my comments to make it come across as that's not the case.
Yeah, so. Yeah. I don't mind, sparring a bit on these issues, but it's just I am passionate about the truth just as you are, and we both have strong views on what we think the truth is, and we hope we're right, but. At the end of the day, it's, I think for me, the dialogue is important because as long as we're both really seeking better understanding and truth, that well, it's even if we don't convince each other, even if we've still made progress. We've still maybe I don't know. It's I think I'm not sure how to say it exactly, but I think it's spiritually constructive to engage with people who have different perspectives.
Yes. Yeah. That's absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate that. And there's, yeah, absolutely agree. Wholeheartedly agree. And I appreciate you and you're taking this time and your willingness to come discuss these things here. So I greatly enjoyed it. And
yeah, I've enjoyed it too. Feel free if you have the time to search my blog. I've got lots of stuff I've written on Molinism and other related topics. You might find something to chew on there. But
sounds like a blessing. I appreciate that. Okay, I guess we'll wrap it there. So there was lots of comments along the way, so I appreciate everyone that's commented, and we won't have time to get into specific comments for this episode, but I appreciated them nonetheless. And thank you again, Dr. Rhoda. And
thank you, Dan.
God be with you.
All right. Good night.